The drawing was taped crookedly to the wall beside the navigation console. A stick-figure ship. Two stick-figure people waving from the window. Below it, in green crayon, the words, "Come home safe." Chief Engineer Bricks had put it there on the first day. His daughter had drawn it the night before they left Earth. Nobody asked him to take it down. Nobody would dare. Captain Dara Osai noticed it every morning when she walked onto the command deck of the UES Iron Covenant. She never said anything about it. She just looked at it for 1 second, then got to work. Today, the work was not good. "Read it again," she said. Navigator Senna Akaffer read it again. She was 26 years old and the youngest person on the ship. She was also the one who had found the problem, which meant she was the one who had to keep explaining it. "The Myrathi have been moving their border markers," Senna said. "Not fast. A few kilometers every 2 or 3 years. Legal filings each time. Council approved every single one. But if you put all the moves together on one map and watch them in order." She put them on the main screen. The room went quiet. The Veloci home system, Orvith Prime, sat in the center of the display. 30 years ago it had opened trade lanes in 4 directions. Now those lanes were gone. The Myrathi border wrapped around Orvith Prime like a hand slowly closing into a fist. "How long until the Veloci have no legal exit route?" Lieutenant Varro Solis asked. He was standing with his arms crossed, which he always did when the news was bad. "At the current rate," Senna said, 8 years, maybe 7. "We report this to the council," said Ambassador Yura Den. She was standing near the back of the room, away from the main consoles, the way she always stood, like she wanted everyone to remember she was not military. "That is the process. We document, we report, we let the council act." "The council approved every single border move," Osai said. "Then we flag it as a pattern and submit a formal." "Ambassador," Os did not raise her voice. She rarely did. "I have read your brief. You have read mine. We both know what the council will do with a formal submission from one junior Earth captain about a 30-year Myrathi land strategy. We know exactly how long that will sit in a queue." Den did not answer. That was its own kind of answer. Graxal spoke from the far left console. He was Veloci by birth, Earth Fleet by choice, and had served on the Iron Covenant for 6 years. He had family on Orvith Prime. He never talked about them during missions. He was talking about them now. "My mother's village is in the northern settlement belt," he said. 2,000 people, farmers mostly, they grow spice root. They have no weapons and no shields and no political allies." He paused. "My people have a saying, when the Myrathi offer peace, count your children first." Nobody said anything after that. Their orders were simple. Escort Ambassador Den to Orvith Prime for a Galactic Council peace delegation meeting. Observe, document, do not engage, return. Simple. Os had been a captain for 11 years. She knew what simple orders looked like when they were handed down by people who had not looked at the actual map. She looked at the map now. She looked at Senna's display, at the slow, patient closing of that Myrathi hand around the Veloci system. She thought about 8 years. She thought about 7. Then she looked at Brix's drawing on the wall. "Come home safe." "Set course for Orvith Prime," she said. "Best speed." The Iron Covenant moved. It was not the largest ship in Earth Fleet. It was not the newest. It had a crew of 41, a weapons system that Admiral Holt back at Earth Command privately called overbuilt, and a captain who had a reputation for reading orders very carefully and then making judgment calls that gave admirals headaches. The 3-day transit to Orvith was quiet. Senna kept updating her border maps. Varro ran weapons drills every morning without being asked. Brix did things in the engine room that were technically against 4 separate safety protocols and would make the ship 30% faster in a fight if it ever came to that. Ambassador Den spent most of the transit writing reports. She was good at reports. On the last hour of transit, long-range sensors came alive. Senna looked at her console, then she looked at it again. "Captain," she said, her voice was very steady for someone her age. "I'm reading residual ion trails, heavy class, multiple signatures." "How many?" Osei asked. Senna counted. "At least 40, she said. "Maybe more. They left recently, within the last 6 hours. Heading away from Orvith Prime, back into Myrathi space." Osei stood up from her chair. That was something she did not do often. "And Orvith Prime itself?" Senna checked the communication channels. She checked them again. She tried the emergency frequencies, the diplomatic band, the civilian open channel that the Veloci used for trade broadcasts, the one that had been running continuously for 60 years without interruption. Silence. Complete silence. "Nothing," Senna said quietly. "They've gone dark." Osei looked at Graxal. He was already looking at her. His hands were flat on his console and his face was very still. She looked at the drawing on the wall one more time. Then she said, "All ahead full." The first thing Senna noticed when the shuttle broke through the clouds was the color of the smoke. She had read about Orvith Prime in her transit briefings. The Veloci burned spice-root wood in their homes, in their temples, in small fires outside their doors at night as a tradition older than their written language. The smoke from spice-root was supposed to be pale gold, sweet-smelling, something you remembered for years after. The smoke rising from the northern settlement belt was black. She did not say anything. None of them did. The shuttle went down in silence. They landed 2 kilometers from what had been the largest Veloci town in the northern region. Graxal walked ahead of everyone else. His stride was long and fast and nobody tried to keep pace with him. Osei let him go. She understood. What they found was not a ruin. It was too recent to be a ruin. Ruins had time in them. This had no time at all. The buildings were still standing, some of them. The fires in others were still burning low. Personal items were in the streets, bags, tools, a child's woven toy pressed into the mud near a doorway. Varro was counting. He always counted. He did not tell anyone the number. They found Prin in the remains of what had been a community gathering hall. She was sitting against the far wall with her knees drawn up, very still, the way very old people sometimes sit when they have decided to stop moving and just let the world do what it will. She was Veloci, taller than a human, with gray-blue skin and large eyes built for Orvith Prime's dim light. Those eyes looked up when Osei stepped through the door. She did not seem afraid. She seemed tired in a way that went past the body. Osei crouched down to her level. "Can you walk?" she asked. Prin looked at her for a long time. "You are human," she said. Her standard was old-fashioned, careful. "Yes." "Did anyone come to help the last time?" Osei did not answer right away. She knew about the last time, 14 years ago. A smaller incident, different settlement. A report was filed. A council discussion was scheduled. The discussion was postponed twice and then quietly removed from the agenda. "No," Osei said, "nobody came." Prin nodded slowly, like this confirmed something she had already known for a long time. "Then, why are you here now?" "Because I looked at a map," Osei said, "and I didn't like what I saw." They brought Prin back to the Iron Covenant on the shuttle. The ship's doctor met them at the bay. Prin did not speak again during the trip up. She sat by the shuttle window and looked down at the smoke. On the command deck, the picture was getting worse. "Myrathi forces are still present," Varro reported. 11 ships in low orbit other side of the planet. They're not firing anymore, but they haven't left. "Position relative to the Council exclusion zone?" Osei asked. Varro's jaw tightened. 11.3 kilometers outside it. They are technically in legal space. Ambassador Den was already at her station. Her voice was controlled, but her hands were not entirely still. "Captain, we need to file an emergency report and move to safe observation distance. That is the protocol. That is what we are here to do. We are here on a peace delegation, Osai said. There is no one left to make peace with on the ground because of those 11 ships, which are in legal space, Den said. If we engage, we are the ones violating the compact. We are the ones who started a war. They started it. Not according to council law. Osai stood at the main viewport and looked at the planet below. The black smoke was visible even from orbit, thin dark lines rising from 6 different points in the northern belt, maybe more on the other side. She thought about the 11-kilometer gap, thought about 30 years of border markers moved 2 kilometers at a time, thought about the word legal and what it actually meant when the people writing the laws were the same ones filing the border changes. She thought about Prin's question, did anyone come the last time? Move us into low orbit, she said, above the largest remaining Veloci population center. Senna had already identified it. Her hands were on the controls before the order was finished. The Iron Covenant dropped through the orbital plane and settled into position. 40,000 people lived in the city below, agricultural hub, no military presence, no shields. Osai opened a direct channel to the Mirathi fleet. A face appeared on screen immediately, Commander Cell of the Mirathi 7th Expansion Fleet. He was broad, gray-scaled, and had the particular expression of someone who has never once been told no by anyone he considered worth listening to. Human vessel, he said. You are in an active Dominion security operation. Remove yourself from this system. This planet is now under our protection, Osai said. Cell looked at her the way a large animal looks at something small that has made a surprising noise. Then he smiled. It was not a kind smile. You have 1 warship, he said. I have 47. You have 1 hour to leave this system before I decide your presence is a provocation. He closed the channel. Varro looked at Osai. He's not wrong about the numbers, he said. I know, she said. 47. I can count, Varro. She looked at the viewport. Then she looked at the drawing on the wall, the green crayon words. Come home safe. She thought, I intend to. Get everyone to their stations, she said, and tell Brix I want everything he has. Lieutenant Varro Solis ran the targeting calculations 4 times. The numbers did not change. 47 Mirathi warships against 1 Iron Covenant. He looked at the engagement probability chart the system produced. The chart had a column labeled Survival, and the number in it was not one he would repeat out loud to anyone. He ran the calculations a 5th time. Same numbers. He closed the screen, stood up from his station, and went to find Captain Osai. She was already calling the crew together. The full crew of the Iron Covenant, all 41 of them, gathered in the main bay. Engineers, medics, weapons crew, navigation staff, Graxol, everyone. They stood in a loose group and looked at their captain. She stood in front of them without notes and without a prepared speech. You all know the situation, she said. 47 ships, 1 of ours. What I am about to do is not in our orders. There is a real chance this ship does not come home. She paused. The shuttles hold 20. I will not order anyone to stay. If you want to go, go now. No record, no consequences, I mean that. Nobody moved. 30 seconds passed. Osai counted them. Nobody moved. All right, she said. That was all she said. She turned and walked back to the command deck, and 41 people followed her. What happened in the next 40 minutes was not strategy in the way admirals wrote about in textbooks. It was 41 people who had decided something and were now working toward it with everything they had. Brix went back to the engine room and did things that would have made the safety board at Earth Fleet Command go pale. He rerouted 3 secondary power feeds directly into the shield grid, bypassing the regulators that were supposed to prevent overload. The shields would burn out faster, but they would hit harder while they lasted. He also found 30 extra% of engine output that the ship was not supposed to have, technically, according to the official specs. Brix had always thought the official specs were conservative. Senna pulled up every geological and atmospheric scan of Orvith Prime she could access and found something useful. The planet had a dense magnetic field running in a band across its northern hemisphere, strong enough to interfere with Myrathi targeting systems if the Iron Covenant stayed inside it. It would not make them invisible, but it would make every shot harder. She also found a narrow passage between two of Orvith's moons. Any fleet coming from the Myrathi side would have to funnel through it to reach the planet. 47 ships became a line. A line was a different problem than a cloud. Varro looked at Senna's map, and for the first time the number in his survival column began to move. Graxal went to the lower storage deck and opened a weapons locker that had not been opened in 2 years. He picked up a rifle and checked it. Then he went to the room where the Veloci survivors from the planet were being kept, 11 of them, the ones they had pulled from the settlements. He looked at them. They looked back. "Can any of you fight?" he asked. 7 of them said yes. Ambassador Den did not try to stop any of it. She sat at a side console on the command deck and opened every emergency channel she had access to. She began recording. Sensor logs, survivor testimony, Prin's account, the border maps, all of it packaged into a tight compressed file and sent on a continuous loop to every council frequency she could reach. She did not know if anyone would listen. She sent it anyway, 12 times, then 20. It was the most useful thing she had ever done in her diplomatic career, and she knew it. The hour expired. Myrathi Commander Cell sent no final warning. The first group of ships simply moved 12 warships breaking from the main fleet and heading toward the Iron Covenant in a slow, confident line, the way you send a message rather than an attack. A demonstration, a lesson in numbers. Osei watched them come. "Senna," she said, "get us into position, that moon passage." The Iron Covenant moved. "Varro," she said, "wait until they're committed into the channel." Varro watched his screen. His hands rested lightly on the console. He had been at this station for 8 years. He knew every sound the ship made. Right now it was making the particular low hum that meant Brix had pushed the power systems past their rated limit and was personally refusing to let them fail. The 12 Myrathi ships entered the moon passage. "Now," Osei said. The Iron Covenant opened fire from inside the magnetic band, where Myrathi targeting was soft and confused, and where the narrow passage meant the enemy ships could not spread or flank. They could only go forward or back, and by the time they chose, Varro had already made the choice for them. 3 minutes and 50 seconds. All 12 ships were dead in space. On the open channel, Cell's voice came through. He no longer sounded like someone giving a demonstration. "What have you put in that ship?" he said. Varro leaned forward and pressed the transmit key himself, without waiting for Osei's nod. "Angry people," he said. On the main screen, the remaining 35 Myrathi warships began to move. All of them. Not a lesson this time. Osei stood up from her chair. "Brix," she said into the ship comm, "I need everything." From somewhere deep in the engine room, Brix's voice came back calm and steady. "You've had everything for the last 10 minutes, Captain. I'm working on more." The first full volley from the Myrathi fleet hit the Iron Covenant like a planet, deciding it was tired of you. Every console on the deck rattled. A ceiling panel came loose and swung down on one side. Someone's water bottle flew across the room and hit the far wall. Brix caught his coffee mug without looking up from his panel, tucked it into a secured slot, and kept working. He had been through worse. He intended to be through worse again when this was over. "Shields at 71, Senna called out. Her voice was steady. She had discovered in the last 4 minutes that she was the kind of person who got quieter when things got bad. She filed that information away for later. "Forward arc coming under concentrated fire," Varro said. A second volley landed. 68%. They're trying to collapse the forward shield and board us. Let them think it's working, Ose said. Senna, pull us deeper into the magnetic band. Varro, I want the port guns only on the lead ship. Make it look like the starboard systems are damaged. They're not damaged, Varro said. I know. He understood. He adjusted. The Iron Covenant began listing slightly to port, angling its fire unevenly, behaving the way a ship that was starting to lose would behave. The Myrathi fleet began to curve around toward the starboard side, moving to flank what they believed was an exposed arc. Senna was already recalculating. The moon passage trick worked once. Now she was using the planet itself. Orvith Prime's magnetic field was strongest along the equatorial band, and she was threading the Iron Covenant through it like a needle through cloth, keeping the Myrathi targeting systems fighting interference with every pass. It was not enough to win, but it was enough to keep them alive long enough to think. Varro took a hit to the shoulder from a console fragment when a near miss shook the ship hard enough to crack 2 stations on the port side. He looked at the blood on his sleeve, looked at his weapon's console, and sat back down. The medic who moved toward him, he waved away with his good arm. After, he said. She gave him a look that said this conversation was not finished, then went to help the 2 people who had been thrown from their seats. Senna took over half the weapons controls without being asked. Her hands moved fast. She had never trained as a weapons officer, but she had trained on these systems the way curious people train on things they are not supposed to need thoroughly, and in her own time, because she liked understanding how things worked. It turned out she was good at this. Starboard batteries coming online, she said, dropping the pretense on Osai's nod. The Iron Covenant rolled and the full starboard arsenal opened on the flanking ships that had come around expecting an easy target. It was not easy. 5 more Myrathi ships went dark in the next 6 minutes, then 2 more. The fleet pulled back to regroup, which gave Brix 40 seconds to do something extraordinary with the shield emitters on Deck 4. He did it in 35. The lower hull breach happened in the 17th minute of the fight. A Myrathi boarding craft punched through the Iron Covenant's belly plating, while the main guns were occupied above, and 20 Myrathi soldiers came in hard and fast through the gap. They were armored and organized, and they expected to find a crew that was overwhelmed and scattered. They found Graxal and 7 armed Veloci survivors waiting in the corridor. What happened next was not a long fight. The Veloci had been farmers until this week, but they had watched their homes burn, they had been pulled from rubble, and they had been given weapons by a man who understood exactly what they were carrying inside them. The Myrathi boarding party made it as far as the 2nd junction. They did not make it to the 3rd. Graxal sealed the breach himself, with his hands and a welding kit, while the fighting was still ending around him. On the command deck, the battle was entering its final shape. Commander Cell had moved his flagship forward. It was twice the length of the Iron Covenant, heavily armored, and sitting at the center of the remaining fleet like a stone dropped into water. Cell was done being surprised. He was coming in personally to end it. Osai watched his ship move. She thought about what she knew about Myrathi flagships. She had read the technical file twice on the transit to Orvith. She had a good memory for things people might someday try to kill her with. Myrathi flagships had one known design flaw. A blind arc beneath the hull where shield overlap geometry left a gap. It was documented in a Xenotech analysis paper that nobody at Council Security had thought worth acting on, because no enemy ship had ever survived a Myrathi fleet engagement long enough to get beneath the flagship. Senna, Osai said, take us down, get us underneath him. Senna looked at the angle, looked at the Myrathi guns that would be on them every centimeter of the approach. That is a very small gap, she said. I know you can find it. Senna found it. The Iron Covenant dove hard, engines screaming under Brix's impossible power curve, and the Myrathi flagship's guns tried to track them and could not turn fast enough. They slid into the blind arc like a key into a lock, and for 3 full seconds the Iron Covenant was directly beneath the largest enemy ship in the system and completely unfireable upon. "All weapons," Osai said. "Everything now." Varro fired with both arms. The flagship came apart from the inside. When the light faded, Cell's ship was dark and silent and venting atmosphere. The 19 surviving Myrathi warships stopped firing. They simply stopped. Total silence on every channel. Senna exhaled slowly. She realized she had been holding her breath for approximately 4 minutes. She made a note not to do that again. Varro finally let the medic look at his shoulder. Then the council emergency channels opened. All of them at once, flooding the comm system with voices, all talking about unauthorized aggression and compact violations, and the serious consequences facing the crew of the UES Iron Covenant. Osai listened for a moment. She looked at the dark shape of the Myrathi flagship drifting outside her viewport. She looked at Orvith Prime below, still smoking, still there. "Log the time," she said quietly, "and someone get Brix up here. He deserves to see this." Prin watched the council feed from the Iron Covenant's medical bay. The screen above her bed showed politicians in clean uniforms sitting in a large circular chamber on a station she would never visit, speaking in careful measured voices about a situation she had lived through with her body. They used words like incident and unauthorized escalation and review process. They did not use the word massacre. She noticed that. She noticed most things. She watched without expression. She had heard careful words before. Careful words had been used the last time too. On the command deck, the words were less careful. "You are in violation of Articles 9, 14, and 22 of the Non-Interference Compact," said the council representative on screen, a tall blue-skinned Duvari named Sen who had been talking for 6 minutes without stopping. "The destruction of sovereign Myrathi fleet assets constitutes an act of war under council statute. You are ordered to stand down all weapons, submit to council escort, and prepare for tribunal." "Noted," said Osai. "Captain Osai, this is not a request." "I said noted, representative. I heard you. I will be in touch." She closed the channel. Sen's face disappeared mid-sentence. Varro looked at her from his station, his arm now properly bandaged. "That is going to make things worse." "Things are already as bad as they get," Osai said. "I'm not going to pretend otherwise by being polite about it." Admiral Holt's private channel opened 20 minutes later. Holt was a compact woman with short gray hair and the expression of someone who had been managing headaches for 30 years and had become very good at it. She looked at Osai through the screen for a moment before speaking. "Officially," Holt said, "Earth Fleet Command cannot support your actions. You violated 7 protocols, fired on a sovereign fleet without council authorization, and potentially destabilized the entire Orvith sector. I need you to understand that position." "I understand it," Osai said. "Good," Holt paused. "Unofficially, I have been doing this job for 29 years and I have never once been as proud of anyone as I am of you right now. That is also something you need to understand." "Understood," Osai said. Holt's expression shifted to something more careful. "The tribunal is real, Dara. Get your documentation in order. Every sensor log, every communication, every second of footage you have. You're going to need it." The channel closed. What happened next was not Osai's doing. It was Ambassador Den's. Den had been quiet since the battle ended. She had sat at her console while the council channels screamed and the formal charges were filed, and the political machinery began grinding toward a very specific outcome. She had said nothing. She had been working. She filed her own submission to the tribunal at the 40-hour mark. It was not a short document. It contained the complete sensor record of the Orvith approach. The border map analysis Senna had built, showing 30 years of 2-kilometer shifts, the settlement footage from the shuttle landing, Prin's full recorded testimony, which Den had taken herself, in the medical bay, carefully and completely, the 11-kilometer legal gap the Mirathi had used, the 47-year history of council-approved Mirathi border filings. All of it organized and cross-referenced and submitted through every legal channel Den had access to, which were more than most people had access to. She had also quietly sent copies to the press offices of 37 council member species. The footage from Orvith Prime began playing in council chambers 16 hours later. Mirathi High Chancellor Duvar moved immediately to have it ruled inadmissible as evidence gathered under illegal military circumstances. The Council Procedural Committee took the motion under consideration. While they were considering it, the Veloci sent their own transmission. It was not an argument. It was not a political statement. It was a list, read aloud by a single Veloci voice in plain standard, every settlement in the northern belt, and every name of every person who had lived there. The voice was steady throughout. The list took 11 minutes and 14 seconds to complete. The council chamber was very quiet when it ended. The procedural committee declined to rule the footage inadmissible. 12 smaller species who had been silent for years, quiet, careful, non-confrontational in the way you are when you know you are not powerful enough to matter, began, one by one, submitting their own documentation to council. Old incidents, old border changes, old careful words that had been used with them in rooms much like this one. The chamber, which had not seen this kind of noise in decades, became very loud. Duvar opened a private channel to the Iron Covenant. Osa accepted it. He was exactly what she expected, controlled, old, and used to having gravity in a room. "You have caused considerable chaos, Captain," he said. "I stopped a massacre," she said. "You interfered in a legal Dominion operation and destroyed sovereign fleet assets, and in doing so you have opened a door that a great many parties are now going to walk through. Whatever you think you accomplished, the consequences of your actions will outlast your career, your ship, and possibly your species standing in this council." I looked at him carefully. "Is that a threat, Chancellor?" "It is a fact." "Then I'll deal with it as a fact," she said. "You should know I've looked at your border maps, all of them, 30 years of them. The Veloci were not the only system you were working on. There were 4 others." She let that sit for a moment. "I imagine the council is going to find that documentation in Ambassador Den's submission, probably within the hour." Duvar's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. "You have made an enemy of an empire," he said. "I already knew that," she said, "the moment I moved into orbit." She closed the channel. Across the ship, the crew worked quietly at repairs and waited for news. In the medical bay, Prin watched the council feed, and for the first time since they had found her in the ruins of the gathering hall, her expression changed. She was watching the list of names being played again in the chamber, watching the council members sit still through all 11 minutes of it. It was not a smile exactly. It was something older than a smile. The look of someone who had expected nothing and received something and did not quite know what to do with it yet. On the command deck, a new message arrived from the tribunal office. "Charges against Captain Dara Osai, suspended pending full investigation. Mirathi Dominion Council seat, frozen pending full investigation." Osai read it twice. Then she leaned back in her chair and looked at the drawing on the wall, at the green crayon words, and the stick figure ship flying through its crayon stars, and let out a breath she had been holding for 3 days. 3 weeks after the battle, Senna found the drawing still taped to the wall. Someone had added to it. A second stick figure ship had been drawn beside the first one, in a different crayon, red, slightly crooked, clearly done by an adult hand trying to draw like a child. The 2 ships flew side by side through the same crayon stars. Underneath, In handwriting that was definitely not a child's, someone had added 3 more words below the original green ones. "Come home safe, we did." Senna stood in front of it for a long time. She did not ask who had done it. She did not want to know. It was better as a thing the whole ship had done. The Iron Covenant was still being repaired. Deck 4 was sealed behind temporary plating. The lower hull breach Graxal had welded shut was being properly fixed by a team from Orvith's orbital station, where the surviving Veloci engineering staff had offered their help without being asked, and then simply showed up with tools and did not leave until the work was done. Brick spent most of the 3 weeks in the engine room, putting things back the way they were supposed to be. He also quietly put some things back in ways that were slightly different from the official specs. Not in ways anyone would notice during a standard inspection, but in ways that someone who knew the ship very well might appreciate later. He also called his daughter on a video link every evening. She asked him each time if the ship got hurt. He said yes each time. She asked if he fixed it. He said he was working on it. On the 3rd week he said yes. She said good and showed him a new drawing she had made, this one with more ships in it, an entire fleet of stick figures and the words, "Daddy's ship and its friends." He kept that one too. On Earth, the Military Review Board convened. It took 4 days. The panel found Captain Dara Osai in violation of 7 separate fleet protocols, 2 council compacts, and 1 regulation that turned out to have been written specifically to prevent this kind of situation. They also awarded her Earth's highest military decoration. Both findings were filed on the same day, in the same report, which was something the review board had never done before and would probably never do again. The officer who wrote the citation for the decoration, a retired admiral named Pell who had come out of retirement specifically to make sure it was worded correctly, reportedly spent 3 days on the first paragraph alone. It read, in part, "For choosing conscience over compliance, at cost to herself and in full knowledge of that cost, and for proving that a single correct decision made by a single crew can change the direction of history." Ambassador Den returned to council chambers. She was reassigned within a week, not demoted, which surprised many people, but moved sideways into a new role that had not existed before. Her title was Special Investigator for Systemic Border Violations. She had no staff yet and a very large mandate, and she began work on her first day by pulling up a list of 32 species whose border situations looked, when you put the maps together over time, uncomfortably familiar. She sent a copy of the list to Senna, who had helped her build it. The Galactic Council formally investigated the Myrathi Dominion. The 11-kilometer loophole was closed within the month. 6 other similar loopholes, different wording, same practical effect, all quietly filed and approved over decades, were found during the investigation and closed. High Chancellor Duvar stepped down from his position citing health reasons. Nobody with access to the investigation files believed that. The 12 species who had filed their own grievances were assigned a joint hearing. The chamber was booked for 6 months. Prin left the Iron Covenant on a Tuesday. She had been offered passage to a Veloci resettlement colony on the far side of the Orvith system, where several thousand survivors were already building something new. She accepted. On the morning she left, she came to the command deck wearing her own clothes again, the ones she had been found in, now cleaned and mended. She stopped in front of Osai. She did not say thank you. Os had the feeling that in Veloci culture, thank you was too small a thing for too large a moment, and that Prin knew more about the size of moments than most people ever would. Instead, she said, "We remember the ones who came." Then she walked to the shuttle bay and she left. Graxal did not leave. There was no particular ceremony about it. He simply did not request a transfer and nobody suggested one, and after a while it became clear that he was exactly where he was going to stay. He told Os, once, quietly, after a long repair shift, that his people believe those who stand beside you and fire are something more than crew or colleague or shipmate. The Veloci word for it had no direct translation into Standard. The closest was something like, "The family you chose when the fire made the choice with you." He seemed satisfied with that. The Iron Covenant was formally recommissioned 6 weeks after the battle. Its mission classification in the official fleet registry was updated. The old classification, Diplomatic Escort, Class 3, was replaced with a new one that took the review board nearly as long to name as the decoration citation. They settled on Humanitarian Intervention Priority 1. On the first morning of the new assignment, Osai arrived on the command deck and found it running normally, the way a well-kept ship runs, quietly, with competence, the hum of a crew that knows its work. Senna was already at navigation. Varro was at weapons, arm heeled, coffee in hand. Brix was in the engine room talking to someone on a personal comm, probably his daughter. New orders waited on Osai's console. Another sector. Another silence that the data suggested should not be that quiet. Another set of border maps that looked fine individually and told a different story when you laid them on top of each other. She looked at the drawing on the wall, the two ships now flying together. She looked at her crew. She sat down, opened the orders, and reached for the comm. "Iron Covenant to Earth Fleet Command," she said. "We see it, we're going in." The ship moved.